The 1999 classic, Soul Reaver, has so often been discussed and mentioned, you'd forget it's part of the larger Legacy of Kain franchise, or that it even has a sequel. Released in 2001, building on the much anticipated cliffhanger ending of the original, Crystal Dynamics ties in the story of Blood Omen into Raziel's journey, as well as turn the gameplay formula into something more linear, forward-thinking, and relevant to the narrative's ambitions. For various reasons, it's never gained significant fame nor appreciation as one might have expected from its lineage, yet it does offer much better design in certain respects and a far more realised vision for the Legacy of Kain Saga. Soul Reaver 2 begins immediately after the ending of the first game, wherein Raziel finally tracks down Kain, only to have him leap into Nosgoth's distant past, well before the events of Blood Omen. Raziel is confronted by the Machiavellian time streamer Mobius from the first game, who strikes a deal for the former to hunt down and destroy Kain to return balance to the world. This continuation of the first title setup soon gives way to revelations by the Vampire Lord himself to the fates and histories of both characters, and how intertwined they are to Nosgoth's fate. The story is the center stage of Soul Reaver 2, packed with numerous surprises and nuances that it makes discussing many pivotal moments difficult without ruining their lasting first impressions. The typically excellent voice work by Michael Bell, Simon Templeman, and the late Tony J, and writing by Amy Hennig, is now properly realised in much improved graphical and environmental fidelity, alongside better camera work and direction for the scenes that fulfill Idas's epic Shakespearean vision. There's so many quotable lines and fantastic interactions between characters that are easily some of the highest points for the series and hold up superbly. Although, by trying to conjoin the Blood Omen and Soul Reaver storylines, the writers have to do a lot of retconning to tie everything together. This both means that players unfamiliar to the Blood Omen canon, a weighty percentage of Soul Reaver players, like I originally was, will find themselves overwhelmed by the frequent name droppings. Vorador, Janos Audrin, King Richard, the Balance Guardians, this is all stuff that went way over my head until I went back and played the 96 original. It also reveals how the games were written by different people. The Soul Reaver, previously just a powerful sword, is now an ancient, time-bending, legendary super weapon, and that the vampires are part of a holy race that foretold a messiah. Most of this is delivered in expository dialogue between characters and observations by Raziel. Aside from a few moments, the lengthy scenes are quite reserved, which does make the pacing feel a bit slow. However, the richly packed themes presented and expressed by many characters like fate, history, self-determination, and immortality are still thought-provoking and timeless. It may answer some of the more pressing questions of prior games, yet it still raises plenty more, ending with another irksome cliffhanger. Soul Reaver 2 progresses partially like a typical linear adventure game, except you often move through the same environments though at different points of time. This is so as to overcome environmental obstacles and to meet particular characters before their demise. From the get-go, you bring over all the prior abilities like swimming, climbing, and the spectral realm. After the introduction though, the Reaver becomes a permanent weapon regardless of health. Most of your time is spent travelling to different dungeons, solving puzzles, and watching cutscenes. There's a light overworld in place, little more than a straight path they have to fight through, as well as show the condition of the world, going from a somber yet strangely comforting landscape to broken, decaying, and packed full of demonic horrors. It works really well in adding greater stakes and context to your fight. You know the dark future that lays ahead. Unlike similar titles, the surprising absence of unlockables and collectibles pushes all the gameplay towards the much fleshed out and interesting dungeons you'll explore. If you played the Tomb Raider games, you already understand the general design template. You enter a large room that bars your way until you branch off and solve numerous environmental puzzles before then proceeding. This is a little different from the first game, however they're substantially improved and tweaked to better fit the tone of the game. The only unlockables in Soul Reaver 2 are imbuing the Reaver with additional elemental properties, like wind, fire, and light. Besides looking cool, they help solve puzzles and reach out of the way areas, bypass sentries, and activate switches. You change between them at specific pedestals, which add an additional complexity. They're not as practical as I hoped, usually only needed in very specific areas, yet they streamline the game to where backtracking is vastly reduced. Now the dungeons themselves are decently well done and paced. They're clear in instructions and significantly vary in scale and whether they can join with other puzzles. It's a mix of pattern recognition, platforming, sequence forming, and using the different Reaver elements. The music and art direction are major standouts and turn the sometimes dullish tasks into engrossing and evocative explorations. Perhaps tellingly, the devs remove any end-stage boss fights to reduce the gaminess like other titles in favour of more storytelling. The spectral realm mechanics are carried on, although while with less emphasis, it's still cool. It works the same, switching can be done at any time, while returning to the material plane is only possible at certain points. An interesting wrench thrown in is how the Soul Reaver gradually saps away from your health, unless satiated with enemy lives. It's not a major issue with an abundant health bar and plenty of enemies, but does push you to keep moving. Combat itself has been overhauled into something much more playable. Instead of the annoyingly blocky attacks and dodges with enemies far too tough for their own good, there's more combat options to deal with a high influx of enemy types, from vampire hunters to reptilian demons. The Reaver is your main weapon and can be unveiled to hack away at opponents. The more people you kill in succession, the more powerful the Reaver becomes, eventually being able to one-hit kill most enemies. Pretty sweet, except that it can overload and rapidly eat away at your health, and that it absorbs souls on death, preventing you from healing. To reduce your reliance on it, different weapons are included like axes and swords. There's now combos that can be performed to deal greater damage, and even fling opponents away for a bit of crowd control. Dodging attacks is easier and more responsive, so crummy hit detection is less of an issue. A little bit. Raziel can perform finisher moves on weakened foes for a satisfying top-off to the otherwise repetitive fights. You wouldn't think this at first, but most skirmishes can be avoided by simply running past, as they should be. You don't get anything by participating in fights, especially when enemies respawn and the fighting mechanics don't change after the first hour. It seems the devs were aware of this by occasionally forcing you into encounters to slow down your progression. Anyhow, that doesn't make much difference when the game is quite easy. The annoying but reasonable punishment of being sent back to the Elder God is gone in favour of frequent checkpoints and plenty of opportunities to refill your health. Aside from a few monster types that can spike the difficulty, if you get too low on health, just switch to the Spectral Realm, juice up, and come back to finish them off. Soul Reaver 2 has a great narrative with beautiful presentation and direction with better level design, and from those aspects alone, it's perhaps the best title in the series. Still, as a game, it's fairly average, encumbered by its combat, repetition, and intense linearity at around 7 hours. There's seriously no other content here besides the main story, and since cutscenes are unskippable, replayability is very low, unlike the original or even Blood Omen, which offered up enough diverse combat and adventurous excursions that filled up the main quest. Does this mean it's not worth playing? No, as a continuation of the themes and ideas that in my opinion makes the Legacy series so memorable and noteworthy are carried and even developed on. Obviously, those wanting exciting fighting mechanics and are unfamiliar with the lore should be dissuaded, otherwise it rewards longtime fans like myself. This will be the last Soul Reaver entry, as the following titles will try a few different ideas and form a conclusion, all to mixed results.